Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show brought to you by the FTN Network. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur. We are out here grinding our way through the madness of March. And I got to tell you, it's been a great couple of days, couple of weeks, honestly. But as we get further and further into March, it's a bittersweet feeling because, hey, the season's coming to an end. We don't love that, but it's also our time to get hot. And the FTN DFS CBB Discord has been ultra hot. It has been green screens and window trips galore. And you know that's what we like to deal here at the show. Appreciate all of you who continue to support us. Our Friday night show is a great success. Thanks to Adam for coming onto that one. And of course, this will be the last week of a 3-show week. We're going to be doing 4 to 5 starting next week. Can't wait. I know you guys are there with me as well. If you're watching on Twitter live here or on X/YouTube, please make sure that you hop over, drop those likes on the YouTube, the algorithm-based world that we live in. All of those likes, comments, questions, concerns, reposts, retweets, shares, all help a tremendous amount. We are growing our brand, our network, and we really do appreciate all of the support you guys continue to give us. I also have a promotion, March 20. If you go there and you scroll to the bottom of this page here on YouTube, you'll see the FTN pricing page. Go in there. There is a discount there for welcoming in March Madness, March 20 as the promo code. Get yourself 20% off all packages. Great deal. And you can do a monthly option if you want to try us out for a month as well. A lot of cool, great, profitable, actionable things that are happening here, whether it's betting or DFS, season long, dynasty, everything. Our MLB team is cooking in the lab right now, and we're getting ready here, doing some best ball stuff. Underdog has best ball drafts happening for the tournament. I can have rankings for that. Absolutely cannot tell you how excited I am for that. Obviously, breaking down every single DFS slate, as you know, and then our community members get access to the projection sheet in its entirety. That includes for both main slate and any secondary slates, whether that is afternoon, night, all of that good stuff. We do it all. There's also main slate breakdowns, articles, betting trackers, everything that you could possibly need to be successful here. And I feel very good about the product that we are rolling out there. And you guys have been giving me feedback that indicates the same. We are into conference tournaments here. Crazy enough, those did start with the ASUN and plenty more. We have previews dropping for those both on social media in video, short form content, as well as article breakdowns. So lots of content coming your way. And then Selection Sunday, it's less than 15 days away. We will have our live Selection Sunday show taking place as the bracket is revealed. RIP to Greg Gumbel. We will miss him tremendously, but very, very excited. Hopefully they do something to honor his memory, but just hanging out. We're going to have special guests there and interacting with you guys in the chat as we go and just kind of giving our live feedback on what we think about the various pairings, seedings, regions, all of that good stuff. If you're new to the show, welcome. What we do here is we break down the CBB DFS from a game-by-game manner. That is the tried and true method, I believe the most advantageous. And we're typically going to break down the main slate, if you will, on DraftKings. We do still provide FanDuel coverage. We do provide coverage for the night slate, afternoon slate, as I mentioned earlier. But the purpose of this show, especially the daytime version, to act as a day of, just to go through, hash out the games, point out anything that we see that is advantageous, and work our way to the end where we'll provide you a core for both sites, any advantageous prize picks, props that we like, best bets. Then we'll get out of here, get ready. We have normal lock. By that, I mean the 4 p.m/7 p.m. hour. None of this half an hour earlier business. But day hoops with conference tournaments, it means we get day basketball. Strap in, boys and girls. Let's get it. We're going to kick things off here with Rutgers versus Purdue. Right now, we have it as a total of 152.5. Purdue is a 10.5 point favorite. Let's get the screen up here. That you all know and y'all love. There we are. And then there were a few of you who said there was some blurriness there. If you're watching on your laptop, just give it like 10 seconds. It'll autofocus for you there, and you can see what's happening. If you're on mobile, just kind of zoom in a bit, and that'll fix it as well. But those are the quick fixes there. They will just automatically fix themselves if you wait long enough. All right, let's get into this. The Purdue side looking very good. Now, we haven't talked about it as one of the top DVP spots on the season necessarily, but front court players have had a lot of success against Rutgers, and especially in conference play here lately. That is because they don't never mind the screaming child in the background. They're not being assaulted. They're just going crazy. Can we not do that? I don't know why you're giving me a dirty look. Anyhow, front court players against Rutgers, it's been an advantageous spot. There's one in particular for Purdue that we want to talk about, and that, of course, is Caleb First. I'm kidding. It's Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's priced at a pretty reasonable at this point, 8.9K. Love Trey Kaufman-Renn, and you can see there in the early look at the projections, right about 35 minutes, he should absolutely shred this Rutgers front court. In fact, we have him projected to score almost 25 real points and pulling down nearly 8 rebounds. It's a huge projection for Trey Kaufman-Renn. He's his own worst enemy sometimes, as in getting into some foul trouble. We have seen 2 foul participation from the Purdue coaching staff there with Matt Painter, so I'm not as worried about that against this Rutgers team. I think he's absolutely going to dominate. One of my favorite plays on the slate, Trey Kaufman-Renn. Braden Smith is always a great play. Whenever he's under 10K, you have to definitely look his way. If it's competitive at all, he's going to play every single minute. I have him right around 39 there. You can see he projects extremely well too. If you can fit both of them, it's spendy, I get it, but it's a great way to go on this slate. Now, I expect Ace Bailey to have a sizable amount of ownership. His price lately has been around that 7.5, 7.6 range. He's been very chalky. That will probably continue, even though he's priced upwards a little bit towards 8.2. And you can see in the projections there, he does look pretty advantageous, scoring over 34 fantasy points. And same could be said about Dylan Harper, who's priced cheaper than Braden Smith there at 9.3. So you have 4 pieces in this game that are great overall. Obviously can't fit all 4 together. I like Smith and Kaufman-Renn for more of a main build. Don't mind Bailey and Harper for more of a GPP look, although I do think Bailey has a chance to be very highly owned. I am not anticipating huge ownership for Trey Kaufman-Renn, and in the article that just dropped, I do have him listed as the Posh Play of the Day. That's my own little theme music for it. Posh Play of the Day here at the Super Show just means our sneak, what we expect to be a player under 30% owned and to have a really phenomenal chance at 5x plus. It's typically a guard. They're usually in a 7K range historically. It's named Posh because of our great legendary Posh Alexander way back during freshman and sophomore season at St. John's. Nobody ever rostered him, and he got 1 million steals per game, and he carried us to the green screens quite often. So it's named after him, and it will remain that way for quite some time until I deem it necessary to change it. So Trey Kaufman-Renn, as a front court player, a big man as it were, they don't fit into the Posh play very often, but I do recognize that he is one of the best plays here, and I just don't know that people are going to roster him. We do have some value pieces. CJ Cox, he's a little more expensive at 5K, so that price has risen. We do like the tighter pricing, by the way. Lower scores is better and advantageous for us, and we've seen those results over the last 7 days. Tyson Acuff at 4K. He's been playing more. He's been cutting into the minutes of Dylan Grant, some of the others in the starting 5. And then I think Lithon Somerville and guys like that are going to have their hands full trying to defend this athletic and specimen that is Trey Kaufman-Renn. And then some secondary pieces, guys that can pop off at times, Jeremiah Williams, Fletcher Lawyer, who are going to shoot a bunch. Not that enticing, that entertaining, that great of plays, especially Lawyer at 6'5". That's a little bit of a tough play for me to get behind. But I'm absolutely going to be involved in this game in a myriad of ways, and that starts with Trey Kaufman-Renn. All right, let's move on to the next one here. And there's no injury designations. That's the other thing we do here. We'll give you any injury designations and projected starting lineups. Daniel Jacobson, who's been out since the beginning. So nothing really to worry about here. Knock on wood, we don't have any late news. Projected starting lineups here. They've been the same for both teams. I expect that to continue. That would be Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Jeremiah Williams, Lithon Somerville, and Dylan Grant. On the Purdue side, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Fletcher Lawyer, CJ Cox, and Caleb First. 1 second. Can you stop? Yeah, take that. Go. All right. Next game on the slate here, North Carolina versus Virginia Tech. It's a total of 148.5. North Carolina is a 7.5 point favorite. Projected starting lineups here for the Carolina side, RJ Davis, Jalen Withers, Ven Allen Lubin, Drake Powell, and Elliot Kadu. On the Virginia Tech side, looking like we might have some injury news here. Jaden Young, Jael Poteet, Brandon Rexsteiner, Ben Burnham, and Tyler Johnson. The main injury designation here is Toby Lawal, who is considered a game time decision. Now, if he starts, we have to love the matchup, right? A front court player who can rebound as well as anybody in the conference against his North Carolina front court has to be in consideration, but he has to be starting. It's one of those deals where he's available but off the bench. I'm not interested. I'm doing nothing with him. Rodney Brown, questionable for Virginia Tech. If Lawal can't go, Poteet is that natural spot there, roughly 5K in that range. He makes sense for the same reason. He can rebound, block shots, do a little bit on the inside, and then plays like Jaden Young, who played a ton of minutes last time out because there was no Rodney Brown, is also in consideration here as well. Let me pull that up on the screen. All right. So you can see Poteet with roughly 25 minutes is the top projection on this game, along with Jaden Young. And that's just the anticipation that they're going to play huge amounts of minutes here, depending on the status of those players like Lawal and like Rodney Brown. Now, in their last game against Syracuse, it was an entertaining overtime win, 101-95. So some of the minutes were accelerated for that reason. Jaden Young played 40, Tyler Johnson 32, Poteet 25, Ben Hammond 33, and Jaden Schutt 33 off the bench. So definitely some interest here in Virginia Tech. North Carolina's been winning games, beating the lesser conference teams as they've needed to with that date with Duke looming. So you do have some interesting looks here for Virginia Tech, especially if the game gets out of hand. Jaden Schutt only 4-9 off the bench. Young is somewhat interesting there at 5-5 as mentioned. Ben Burnham would get more minutes. So there is some decent looks there. But the main decision here is Lawal, who I do have zeroed out at the moment. If he plays and starts, I definitely want exposure. I don't know if he'll get to my main lineup or not, but he is priced at 7K, and there is upside there for sure. As far as the UNC side goes, their rotation, man, it's just uncomfortable for me at this rate. The depth of it has really made North Carolina look better, and they've improved for sure, but it's really just kind of wreaked havoc for DFS purposes. Jalen Withers, RJ Davis, those are your primary two, have been really wrecking it. Then Allen Lubin played 29 minutes last time out, Drake Powell and Elliott Kadu, but you still have Seth Trimble, Ian Jackson, and Jalen Washington off the bench, and they are definitely playing a ton. And I think the Ian Jackson situation is just a hot hand. If he's hitting, maybe Kadu's losing minutes. If Powell's hitting, maybe Seth Trimble's losing minutes. So that guard rotation suddenly makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to say Jalen Withers is a complete fade at this upper price because he's been playing pretty well. He had another double-double against FSU, 11 and 10, and 4 assists. He would have paid off at that price. I'm not going there, but this is a very easy matchup against Virginia Tech when it comes to fantasy upside. He's got some, most definitely. Virginia Tech has been a team we've been able to target against frequently. When you look through the Tar Heel side, RJ Davis and Elliott Kadu do project the best and closest to value. Davis is a meager 8-4. I like him in closer games typically, not as much in blowouts, and I'm just really kind of struggling to feel that excited about North Carolina, even in a great matchup like this, just because of that rotation. I do think, Ian Jackson at 5-1, we know the upside exists a tremendous amount there. As far as Seth Trimble goes, there's upside in GPPs at 6-7, but this is just not a team that I'm going to get too involved with. There's also a couple of games later on in the slate that just have more appeal to me overall. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Come on, you got to get down. Okay, where is it? Next game on the slate, young kids, man, I tell you. Creighton versus Seton Hall. This is a total of 133.5. Creighton is a 10.5 point favorite. Seton Hall has been kind of a lame duck here, and we definitely expect some fantasy goodness from both sides. Projected starting lineup for Creighton: Jemiah Neal, Stephen Ashworth, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Jackson McAndrew, and Jason Green. Seton Hall: Dylan Adewusu, Prince Aligbe, Isaiah Coleman, Garwi Dual, and Godswill Irihane. On the injury side of things, Fedor Zugic is questionable for Creighton, and Chance Jenkins is questionable, borderline doubtful for Seton Hall. This is one I really want to go back to Jemiah Neal. This is one of those classic, like, hey, Jemiah Neal was super chalky on the last Creighton slate. It didn't quite work out. Xavier really kind of just stuffed Creighton into a locker, as it were. Xavier fighting for their life to get into the tournament. It was just kind of a lame duck effort from Creighton. Jemiah Neal was about, 50 to 60% on that last Creighton slate. He's going to be way lower than that now, but still projects extremely well at 7.5. And we just know from our experience over the last decade of playing, people tend to feel burnt by a player and they won't go back to him regardless. So Jemiah Neal at 7.5, great overall play against a Seton Hall team that's very weak, very much on board with him, and will likely be playing him in most of my lineups. Stephen Ashworth is also a strong GPP look at 8.8K, and Ryan Kalkbrenner is an expensive 10.8, but who on this Seton Hall team is going to keep him from grabbing rebounds, scoring, and getting to the foul line? I expect a lot of free throws from Kalkbrenner today, a lot of attempts. In fact, the projection on his attempts is pushing towards 6-7. I would expect it to be even more than that. So those are your top three. There are values here without Zugic. That's about 18 to 20 minutes to go around to guys like Isaac Trout, Jackson McAndrew, Jason Green. Not that interested in Creighton secondary pieces. We know they just don't do enough. So you mainly have to choose from the Neal, Ashworth, and Kalkbrenner group. For me, it is Jemiah Neal. On Seton Hall side, Dylan Adewusu, in a revenge narrative over the weekend against St. John's, was all over him. He was like 10%, and he had a way bigger game than even I would have expected. Was very happy. His price has come up to 7K, which is going to be tough for a lot of people, but you can see he's still projecting very well, and I would think he would play a huge amount of minutes. This Creighton team has been extremely fantasy-friendly from a defensive side of things. This is going to be a problem for them in games that matter here as we get closer to the tournament, because they've just been giving up a ton. Xavier absolutely railroaded them. They gave up about 70 to a banged up Georgetown team, 79 to St. John's, 70 to a UConn team that's hit or miss. There's just been a ton of points scored by a number of teams in conference here, and we're seeing a lot of fantasy production, win or lose. And Seton Hall is not a team I expect to drop a huge number, but I do think even in a potential blowout, Dylan Adewusu is just a great overall play. They're going to give him 30-plus minutes, barring foul trouble or anything like that. And you can see by far and away, he's one of the top projected plays, not only in this game, but on the slate as well. So choosing between Neal and Adewusu, I do like the idea of going with a more balanced approach if you're not paying up, rocking both of those guys, because I think they're going to put up some pretty big numbers, both eclipsing 30-plus, not just because the projections say so, but that's how I'm kind of reading this one as well. Other GBP looks that you can consider: Isaiah Coleman, who's a little bit of a reduced price at 8.1. We know he's going to chuck a bunch of shots. Then you have Prince Aligbe at just 4.9. If you can stay out of any foul trouble there with Kalkbrenner, he has a pretty solid projection. And then Jackson McAndrew at only 4.1. Remember my spiel on McAndrew. He has to make those shots he chucks in the first half. He tends to lose minutes in the second half, and he's rarely on the floor there in crunch time. If this one isn't close, a little bit safer of a play. He is interesting at 4.1. Not a main team play, but as GPPs, if he gets 2 or 3 threes off in that first half, he could very easily pay off that salary. So definitely considering Jackson McAndrew. Warren asked, any extra interest in Lubin if no Lawal? Yep. I mean, North Carolina, it kind of flips without Lawal, so that DVP spot against North Carolina goes away, and then North Carolina has a solid matchup. There's still some bangers on the Virginia Tech side with Burnham, but Lubin has definitely been active and somebody that I would consider playable for sure. Probably won't make a main lineup by any means, but he and Withers have a chance to be very, very good. Yep, take it. All right, next game on the slate here is LSU versus Kentucky. Now, the total is 156.5. Love the over. I think this is one that's headed for like 170, honestly. It is a 13.5 point spread in favor of Kentucky. And you're going to see here in a minute, we have injuries and we have DVP stuff. We have pace. We have everything that we could possibly like in this game. And this is one that I'm very excited about, not only because of the pace, the fantasy goodness, all that, but because LSU games have tended to be either A, ignored by the masses, or B, completely misread. And I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back and act like we know everything. LSU games have been very favorable, very profitable for us. We've hit on games for Corey Chess when he was coming off some bad games. We've hit on games for Damian Collins. We've had those bounce back spots for Jordan Sears. Like, I just feel very comfortable with LSU. And now they're playing Kentucky in a game that should absolutely just shoot out in every possible way. The injury designations make this game interesting. Corey Chest, who is doubtful. He had been starting a lot at the 4 and the 5 throughout this season. Victorious Miller is doubtful. He's been starting, but got banged up last game, only played under 15 minutes. He's not probably going to play. DJ Bailey is questionable, starting to sound like he might be doubtful, but as of now, I have him listed in. Jalen Reed, of course, is out. Jackson Robinson, of course, is out for the season for Kentucky, and then Kurt Kriisa, who's been out as well. All right. Starting lineup projections for this team. LSU, Cam Carter, DJ Bailey, who I do think still plays, Damian Collins, who we love, Curtis Givens, and I think Jordan Sears, with Vic Miller out or doubtful, I think Jordan Sears finds his way back in the starting lineup. It's important to note Sears, who lost his starting gig to Miller and had been playing under 20 minutes, did play 30-plus in their last game with Miller going down early. So Sears, when given big minutes, has come through for us a lot this year. Kentucky-wise, Lamont Butler, we love. Andrew Carr, Kobe Brea, who does slide in for Jackson Robinson, Amari Williams, who's going to have a big game, and Otega Awe. There are a ton of players to like in this game, absolutely. And you see there are, 7, 8 guys who project basically at value or higher. Starts for me with Lamont Butler, who's priced at 6'5", shaking off illnesses, injuries, everything in between. This is a great matchup for him against LSU, not only because he's semi-cheap and he's going to play a lot of minutes, but offensively, I think he takes a much bigger piece of the pie here as he feels more comfortable. And this is also a game where I think he has a chance to rack up a ton of steals. LSU ball handlers are sloppy with the ball. We see them ring up turnovers a ton. I think this is just one of those games where Butler slides in. He scores 12 to 15 real points, grabs some rebounds, 3 to 4 steals, and just easily massacres this price point of 6'5". You see, since he's been back, he hasn't been anything special statistically speaking, but it's very clear he's one of the most important players on the floor. And he scored 15 against an Auburn team that pretty much was taking care of business from the very first second. Now, he did take 13 shots to get there, but that volume and the way that he looked on the court, I see no real ill will remaining. I think he's kind of shaking it off at this point, and I'm very excited for Lamont Butler. We'll have a ton of exposure. You do have Otega Awe at 7'8", priced up, and Amari Williams at 8'5". Now, if you don't believe in Trey Kaufman-Renn, or you don't want to double stack Purdue, I think you want to slide over and get Amari Williams. He rarely has the ownership numbers on these slates, but he continues to produce at a high level, and he doesn't need to score actual baskets to do so. He is so active down low. He gets to the foul line a ton. You'll see he took 5 shots against Auburn, put up a 40 against them, 13 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. And you might think that's a blip. This big man's not getting assists. He's got 3 or more assists in 4 of his last 5 games. He has been able to overcome foul trouble, and he's just producing at an extremely high level. And now he's facing an LSU team that's going to be missing Corey Chest and has a chance to really struggle against Amari if he can stay on the floor. Now, he's drawing 6.2 fouls per 40, which is a top 50 rate, getting 4 fouls called per 40. But this Kentucky team, Butler drawing 4.9 fouls per 40, Awe drawing 5.2 fouls per 40, Andrew Carr 4.1 fouls per 40. There are just a ton of fouls drawn here in this one. 1 second. What are you talking about? You got it. Get it out. What are you talking about? It's giving me a run for my money here. Sorry, guys. This was choking in the other room. We just saved a life. All right. As for the LSU side, with the fact that Vic Miller is likely not going to play, and we already know Corey Chest is pretty much out, it does bring Jordan Sears and Damian Collins far up the player pecking order for us. Collins is only priced at 5'2", Sears at just 4'6", and Sears as a starter, he's going to be a guy that we know will be popular, especially if it's announced that he's starting well in advance. These mid-slate news has been a advantage for us, but this is one of the first games on the slate. There's that first window with 4, so if it's going to be known right away. So I expect ownership for Sears. He's very cheap. He has great usage rate. He hasn't been the most efficient player in the world by any means, but he's definitely a rock solid value option at 4.6 if he is in the starting lineup. I do like Damian Collins, even though he's only 5'2". I don't know that we see the ownership on him, and this is where we've been able to have a distinctive edge here, especially on this LSU starting 4 and starting 5 positions. 27 minutes against Mississippi State, 10 points, 3 rebounds. He was great. The Oklahoma game is where we were all over Collins. 22 points, 4 rebounds, 4 blocks. Yes, it's a road game against Kentucky. Foul trouble galore. He's been slightly better on the road. I'm very comfortable with Damian Collins. I'm not going to proclaim myself the LSU whisperer just yet, but we've had a ton of success here, and he's just way too cheap not to consider. The matchup is absolutely fantastic. So Collins, we're all over. Jordan Sears, we're all over. And you see, nobody on LSU is really that expensive except for Cam Carter at 7.7, and he makes sense as a GPP play. He may put up 40 here. The game stack is very easy to do here because Lamont Butler's cheap. All of the LSU guys are cheap. You could easily fit Amari Williams. A game stack of this one looks really good. And Kentucky is one of those teams, one of the 4 that we always talk about. If they're on the slate, stacking 4 and against, we want to consider it. We want to run it. This is just a great environment overall. It's almost too obvious, which makes me nervous at times, but I'm just going to go with it. Secondary plays, Robert Miller at 4.5, Curtis Givens at 4.3, and Mike Williams, not that Mike Williams, but that Mike Williams at 3.9. We've also saw a spike in minutes for Derek Fountain, who has been in college for a long, long time. He played 24 minutes in the game against Mississippi State. Adequate, 9 points, 5 rebounds. Don't sleep on the fact that he could see a spike in time. He's more of a GBP look along with Williams. But Miller, when there was injuries to Damian Collins and others, we did see him against Florida in 25 minutes, 19 and 10, fully capable. There's a ton of athletic, young talent on this LSU squad, and any number of them can put up a huge game here. But Collins and Sears are our main team looks. The rest of the LSU rotation is very much in play in GBPs. Lamont Butler on the other side, and if you can fit Amari Williams, definitely a good time to do so. Hey, Craig, how you doing? Good to see you, man. Appreciate you stopping by. Let's keep on flying here while I have a minute of non-bother from the child. Baylor versus TCU, total of 139.5. So we go from this great fantasy environment to a lower quality game from DFS perspective. Baylor is a 3.5-point favorite. No real injury designations. We already know Frankie Collins, Josh Ojiawana, they're out for the year for both TCU and Baylor. Baylor has gotten healthy otherwise. Jaden Nunn is back. Jeremy Roach is playing, so they're good to go there. Baylor projected starting lineup: Rob Wright, VJ Edgecombe, Norchad Omier, Jalen Celestine, and Langston Love. I don't have a ton of love for Baylor. TCU games have really kind of just sucked the life out of me and everybody else. And they're involved in such low scoring games or just low possession games. And it's just like dribble, 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 brick, dribble, 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 brick, turnover. It's just nothing really exciting about these games. It is worth noting, though, on the TCU side that we had a slight change in the starting lineup, and I don't know if that will continue, but I am going to mention it this way. Ernest Uday, Vashon Alette, Noah Reynolds, David Punch, and then Jace Posey started last game instead of Brennan Wenzel. Why is that notable? Well, Jace Posey has actually shown to be a pretty high upside player with minutes. He's priced there at 4.4. Wenzel only 3.9. Even if Wenzel starts again, he's really not interesting at 3.9 anyways. But Posey in 23 minutes against UCF, 10 points, 5 rebounds. He put up 19. You go back to the Arizona State game when there was foul trouble back on the 15th of February. He played 30 minutes in that game because he got hot. And he got to the foul line 10 times, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals. He put up a 30, which I believe is a career high for Jace Posey. Yes. So he's shown some flashes here in the last few games, and he scored 10 or more fantasy points in 5 straight. Definitely has given TCU a more dynamic look than Wenzel. 4.4 is cheap enough to speculate on. I would, if he's still 3.7, I might call it a semi-lock. At 4.4, not quite. But the matchup against Baylor is favorable, and I do like what we're seeing out of Jace Posey. So he is the one from the TCU side that I do have the most interest in. And you can see at current projection at 24 minutes, he does get very, very close to value there. Ernest Uday at 6.9. He's pretty interesting going up against Baylor. Baylor is just so undersized right now, having to play Norchad or Mir at the 5. We've been seeing Jalen Celestine at the 4. Like, there's just so much upside for opposing big men against Baylor right now. So Uday's at least in the conversation in that regard. We're not getting much of a discount at 6'9", but I do think he pulls down a ton of rebounds. You can see we haven't projected for over 8 rebounds as it stands right now, in right around 29 minutes. As far as Vashawn Alad, he's a little spendy for me at 8K, but he does carry the most upside for TCU because he contributes in all other categories. And then on the Baylor side, you've got some cheap value pieces. Guys like Jaden Nunn, Jalen Celestine, Langston Love still under 6K. Jeremy Roach is under 5.5K. Like, they're all okay. Nothing really to write home about. Nothing that I'm going to be prioritizing. Last man in types, perhaps. They're not horrible. There's going to be lots of minutes because they're still a pretty short rotation, but the Baylor side just doesn't look that appealing to me, even if they are favored to win by 3.5. So Posey is really the one I want the most exposure to if he does start. And when you look at the various rates here, his shot rate is ballooned up to about 21%. Which is higher than what he has been for most of his freshman season. He does have his defensive rebounding rate nearing 15% as well, and he's drawing right around 3.5, 3.6 fouls per 40, and he has a stocks rate, 2.2% of steals, 2.2% of block. He's pretty solid across the board. I do like Jace Posey, and I think it's smart for TCU to be using him more because he's a prime candidate to transfer if they don't. I think he could be really good depending on where he lands. All right, let's move on here to the next game, Villanova versus Georgetown. This is an interesting game, total of 141.5. Villanova is a 5.5-point favorite. Suddenly people are talking like Villanova is going to get in. How far have we come from the first month of the season? It was like, man, Neptune wasn't the choice. They need to get rid of him. This Villanova team is dead, to suddenly Villanova's getting in. Absolutely insane. So we'll see here. They got to get this win against Georgetown. Georgetown's still very banged up, of course. No Thomas Sorber, but they did get Caleb Williams back. He played 17 minutes off the bench. He's available here tonight. Thomas Sorber, of course, is out. The expected starting lineup, even with Caleb Williams back, is Jaden Epps, Jordan Burks, Malik Mack, Micah Peavy, and Drew Fielder. Perhaps they slide Caleb Williams back in over Burks, but Burks has been one of the best players on the team the last couple of games. So I don't know that it makes too much sense to suddenly bench him. And then on the Villanova side, Wooga Poplar, Eric Dixon, Jameer Brickus, Enoch Bokai, and Jordan Longino. Their bench is short as well, with Tyler Perkins being the primary guy there, and Mosley. As it stands right now, Jaden Epps at 6'2" projects the best, but what can I say about Jaden Epps? I'm not even comfortable paying 5K for him most games. Certainly not comfortable paying 6'2" for him. So I'm going to be low on Jaden Epps overall. I do still have interest in Jordan Burks, who's priced there at 5'3". I think he's a main team play still. But if he were to be knocked out of the starting lineup for Caleb Williams, he would be pretty much a non-factor for me at that point. But he had a massive game last time out. Do have to respect that Villanova's defense has stepped up here the last month of the season, and I'm very nervous about using any of the Hoyas. But short rotation is a short rotation. Caleb Williams is only 3'7", so in a starting role playing 30 minutes, you see he's down there quite low on the list. But if we bump his minutes up and he steps into a much larger role, he suddenly becomes one of the better values on the slate, as you know. And he has played 30-plus minutes as a starter plenty of times before. So we'll see. Right now, I'm just going to keep him penciled in at around 17, 18 minutes, and we'll go from there and do some updates if he ends up starting. Wooga Poplar is the top projected Villanova play. He's still expensive. I get it at 8.7, but this is exactly the type of matchup where he's going to grab a ton of rebounds. We have a really strong DVP spot that's developed that wasn't there before because Georgetown, without Thomas Sorber, they're just not a very scary team on the inside. They get belted down low. They give up a ton of boards. Drew Fielder is doing the best he can, but he's clearly not a guy who can maintain 30, 35 minutes a game. It's just not there for him. He's a strong sophomore. He's been good, but they just don't have a player that can really contain the interior. And Ben Gold, he had a bunch of threes, so it's not really necessarily that he took advantage of the DVP, but as the center on the Marquette team, he did have 15 points, 4 rebounds. Like, he was taking care of business there. If you go back to the game against UConn, which I mentioned, Terrace Reed, man, he looks like he's going to do some work. He did 20 points, 10 rebounds. And this was the game before he absolutely put up 70. He completely clobbered this Georgetown team. Villanova doesn't necessarily have an interior player. Enoch Bokai, I think, does grab a bunch of rebounds today. But is he really worth rostering in your main lineup? Probably not. He's cheap enough at that 4K price point to do something, but he is the first one to get subbed out technically. And Villanova, they won't need to worry about size matching up with Georgetown all that much. I do realize Fielder's almost 7 foot, but he just doesn't strike fear in the hearts of many like Thomas Sorber would. Eric Dixon broke the slate last time out. He's 9.9. He's okay. If you want to get there, don't hate it. Malik Mack, probably almost never rostering him. And then you have Micah Peavy at 10K. He's going to put up 37, 38, but that's an opportunity cost there. Can we spend our money a little more economically? I think we can, but I'm never going to say don't roster Micah Peavy in a matchup like this against Villanova. He should have a good game, but I just don't know how much further over 4X and 40 fantasy points we can reliably expect at this point. All right, let's move on here. We've got our last game on deck, Texas versus Mississippi State. It's a total of 151.5. Mississippi State is a 7.5 point favorite. We also have injury designations here. The main one with Tremont Mark, who is questionable. Kendall Weaver is out. Mark sounds like he's going to warm up, and we'll judge by that. But I really am kind of feeling like he's going to end up not playing. This Texas team has suddenly turned into a mess, and they don't have the right coach at the helm here. I think that kind of became obvious very, very quick. Let's pull this up. This is a game that we definitely want some exposure to, and Mississippi State games have been very fantasy friendly. Now, if Tremont Mark is out, Jordan Pope sitting there at 5'4", he should get a ton of minutes. This would be the projected starting lineup: Trey Johnson, Jordan Pope, Devin Pryor, Caden Shedrick, Arthur Kaluma. On the Mississippi State side, Riley Kugel, RJ Melendez, Josh Hubbard, Cam Matthews, and Michael Nwoko. Jordan Pope is a volatile player, so be very, very careful if you do intend to use him. He does have the top projection there with the minutes at his disposal. He played 36 minutes in their kind of semi-blowout loss to Georgia. He did have a nice second half after breaking out the first half, put up 10, 3, and 3, which brought him to 19 fantasy points. At 5'4", he's a little bit higher price, but definitely looks good. I do still like Arthur Kaluma at 7'3". I honestly feel like he's very low price. Now, Kaluma was busting in a huge way in that game. But the last 7-8 minute period, he put up 20 fantasy points in that last 7 to 8 minutes to save his day and his fantasy owners. So now he's priced at 7'3". Still really like Kaluma. He's by far and away, to me, the best Texas play. And it's a matchup against Mississippi State that I'd consider to be somewhat neutral. They do have Kashawn Murphy, who's an animal, Cam Matthews, who can steal, Michael Nwoko, who can block shots. They do have the pieces to slow him down, but I think I'd be more worried for a player like Caden Shedrick. The only other piece for Texas I want to talk about here is Devin Pryor at 4K. As a starter the last two games, he has played 34 and 30 minutes, had 11 fantasy points and 16. He's 4K, not a very high upside play by any means, but he should be able to eke out 16 fantasy points in a 30-minute mark here once again. Depending on that Mark status, it's just about a guarantee he will play 30-plus minutes if Mark is out. Mississippi State side, I always like RJ Melendez. He's a little bit more expensive now. He's been chalked for a lot of the slates, but we've had the benefit of rostering him on days he wasn't. At 5'7", he's a little bit more expensive. Definitely still playable if he can stay out of foul trouble. He wasn't able to against LSU, but on a fantasy point per minute basis, he's way better than I think people realize. So he's definitely near the top for me as far as Mississippi State plays go. And then Riley Kugel does project extremely well there. He played 30 minutes against LSU, typically around that mid-20s mark at 4.6K. You can see he's right near the top, right around 25, 26 minutes. We have him just under 20 fantasy points. So he's a value piece that you can certainly consider. And then the top GBP looks here. You can always look at the 9.1K price Josh Hubbard because he's going to chuck, and Cam Matthews, who fills it up from a box score perspective. But I like Kashawn Murphy. He's my guy. He does come off the bench, and he typically plays 24, 25 minutes. He does get up closer in close games to that 30-minute mark. They're going to need him against Arthur Kaluma. So I do foresee him playing a lot more today, somewhere between 28 to 30 minutes. I feel pretty comfortable with that. And he does project just over 30 fantasy points. So I'm a big fan of his. GBP-wise, I probably won't get there in my main, but he's a great play that I think could end up on the optimal in both the qualifier and the large field flagship tournament that I still call the Jam, even though I know it's got different names now. And then Trey Johnson, shout to him. This could turn into a Josh Hubbard versus Trey Johnson shoot-off. And if it does, you're certainly going to want exposure to both of those pieces. But the main news here to worry about, Tremont Mark. The projection on Pope is a little aggressive for my taste, but Arthur Kaluma, Sean Murphy, top plays there. Value pieces in Riley Kugel and Devin Pryor. So as it stands right now, the core for me, so that takes us to the end. The FanDuel core is Damian Collins, Lamont Butler, Chad Baker, Mazzara, who's mid 5K there. They have the Auburn game. And then my DraftKings core, Trey Kaufman-Wren, who I mentioned is the posh play, Lamont Butler, and Damian Collins. So on both sides, I'm all over Lamont Butler and Damian Collins. No questions asked. Prize picks wise, Javon Small over 28.5 fantasy points. Lamont Butler over 13.5 points. Just hold on, bring it over here. Bring it over here. Bring it. Bayandongo over 12.5 rebounds. That's a demon play, but going up against Miami, they don't have Javian McCollum. And Dongo will have to play through any foul trouble, but it's Miami. He just had 17 rebounds over the weekend. Am I supposed to believe he won't even get, double-digit rebounds here? No. Is he going to have 20 rebounds? He might. Over 12.5 rebounds, demon number. Take advantage of that. And then Wade Taylor and the Aggies playing against Auburn. Not a favorable spot for them. I'm taking Wade Taylor under 16 points. That's right. Under 16 points for Wade Taylor. BYU, for some best bets, BYU plus 9.5 versus Iowa State. Now, the FTN model loves BYU. Our guy, Frank Brank, loves BYU. I love BYU. It's a tough spot. The prodigy, that is Mike Randall, likes Iowa State. So we're a bit at odds there. And that's okay. You got to look at it one way. It's a tough game, but I do believe BYU does cover. I know they had a tough outing on the road last time, but they can score in bunches. So I am on the BYU side there. Vermont minus 4.5 versus Albany. That's one of our best bets article that just released for free. So check that out. Love Vermont. They are a team that is, under Coach Becker habitually in the NCAA tournament mix. So I will be taking them at home minus 4.5 versus Albany. And then Oakland minus 9.5 versus Green Bay. Green Bay, say what you will about Doug Gottlieb. But we got to give him some credit here. Just kidding. No, we don't. He's awful, terrible as a coach. They're 4-27. This is in the Horizon League tournament here. I expect them to get pelted. Now, they did take Oakland at home to overtime, and that's coming off the heels of a win against Detroit Mercy. So suddenly Green Bay's hot. But Oakland advances here and does cover by 10. So that basically takes us to the end. Let me pull this up here real quick. Sorry about all the distractions and interruptions here. Parent life can be tough. Yeah, you're going to have to wait, bud. I'm just going to pull up the big board here so you guys can get a look, and then we'll finish off. Good opportunity to check out ftnfantasy.com. March 20 promo code. That is a 20% off discount. You can sign up for a month subscription to see what we're all about. Perfect opportunity to do so. Get yourself access to the betting side, the DFS side, dynasty, and season long. And there's going to be a lot of best ball coverage for the tournament and season long. Well, not season long, but drafts for that. The RotoWire / Sirius XM draft will be coming up as well. So definitely check that out. Taking part in that for 4 years in a row. The evildoer that is Razzle keeps winning it for whatever reason. But that's going to be happening. So those of you with Sirius XM, but I'm going to run some leagues for that under the FTN banner as well, which is a similar format. Some 8-man, 10-man drafts that we're going to do. So lots of fun stuff there. And then of course we'll have a bracket competition as well, which will be a small buy-in, $10, $20, something like that. So be on the lookout for all of that stuff. Yeah, I know, buddy. Hold on. All right, here we are. So as it stands right now, I do have some minor adjustments to make, but this will give you an idea of where we stand and what we have going on in terms of the top of the pecking order. Okay. So at the top there, Lamont Butler, Damian Collins, Jordan Sears, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Wren. So that pretty much gives you an idea of where we stand. LSU, Kentucky, and Purdue. Those 3 teams, I want all the exposure in the world. Throw my guy Jemiah Neal in the mix there. Yes, we have to find some value. I also like Dylan Adewusu, so you can add that Seton Hall Creighton game as well. And then I think we'll get our value from guys like Riley Kugel, that Virginia Tech situation there, depending on the wall. And then we've got the cheap guys on the LSU side. And if we have to play Devin Pryor and hope for a 12 to 16, we will. But that is going to take us to the end. Thank you guys very much for your continued support. Back tomorrow, 11 a.m. PST, 2 p.m. EST, breaking down all the Wednesday games. Take care, guys.